The silence in this house has a weight to it. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a dense, settled thing, made of dust motes dancing in the slanted afternoon light and the phantom echoes of a life I once thought I was building. My days are mapped by small rituals, the geography of a constrained existence. The first cup of tea, held in hands that still ache with a phantom chill. The slow, careful journey from the bedroom to the living room, my hip a barometer of the coming weather. The house itself is a shrine to a past that feels increasingly fraudulent. Every object whispers a story. The faded chintz armchair where I read to him as a boy, the mantelpiece crowded with photos of his achievements. Graduation, first car, wedding. A testament to a devotion that flowed only in one direction. My own life is invisible here, tucked into the margins. I live in Oakhaven, a town that prides itself on its quiet, tree-lined streets and the illusion of community, an illusion that feels particularly sharp to someone who has become an island within their own four walls. The world outside my window often feels a million miles away, a pantomime of life that I observe but no longer participate in. Children ride bikes, their laughter a bright, piercing sound. Neighbors collect their mail, wave, and retreat back into their own stories. But my world has shrunk to these rooms, to the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, a relentless measurement of time I am simply enduring. The air is thick with the scent of lavender potpourri and old paper, a smell I once found comforting, but which now seems like the official fragrance of loneliness. It's a loneliness so profound it feels like a physical presence, a cold spot in the center of the room that no amount of sunlight can warm. My routine is the scaffolding that keeps me from collapsing. Water the jade plant on the windowsill. Its sturdy leaves a quiet reproach to my own fragility. Sort the mail, mostly circulars and bills. Watch the afternoon game shows. The boisterous, manufactured joy a stark contrast to the quiet hum of my own refrigerator. It's a life measured in small, repeatable actions, each one a tiny anchor holding me to the present, preventing me from drifting completely into the vast, murky waters of memory and regret. The house is both my sanctuary and my prison, its familiar walls a comfort and a constant reminder of the life I surrendered within them. The squeak of my garden gate is the only sound that regularly breaks the monotony. It's always Mrs. Gable, her face a welcome etching of kindness and concern. She comes over every afternoon around 3, a small plate covered in wax paper in her hands. Today it's lemon drizzle cake. Thought you could use a little sunshine, Eleanor, she says, her voice as warm and comforting as the steam rising from the 2 mugs of tea I've already prepared. She doesn't pity me. She simply sees me. There's a distinction that means everything. We sit at my small kitchen table, the silence between us companionable, not heavy. She talks about her prize-winning roses, the latest neighborhood gossip, the antics of her scamp of a grandson. I listen, offering small comments, the act of conversation a gentle exercise for atrophied social muscles. You're looking a bit brighter today, dear, she observes, her keen eyes missing nothing. A little more color in your cheeks. I offer a small, genuine smile. Her presence is a lifeline, a daily reminder that a world of simple, unselfish kindness still exists beyond the betrayal that has defined my recent past. She is the anchor to my present, the one person who sees me not as a relic of sacrifice, but simply as Eleanor. The smell of the lemon cake, sharp and sweet, sends a jolt through my memory, and I'm suddenly 20 years younger, standing in a sterile, white-walled office that smelled of antiseptic and fear. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of the decision before me. My brother, Daniel, sat beside me, his leg jiggling with a nervous energy that seemed so boyish, so at odds with the gravity of the situation. He was 22, his whole life a bright, shimmering path ahead of him. I was 34, my own path a quiet, unpaved lane. In front of us, a doctor with a tired face explained the procedure, the risks, the recovery. A kidney transplant. A living donor. Me. It's the best match we could hope for, the doctor had said, looking at me, his eyes searching for something. Hesitation, maybe. He wouldn't find it. I remember the feel of Daniel's hand grabbing mine, his grip surprisingly tight. Ellie, you don't have to do this, he'd whispered. his voice thick with an emotion I mistook for selfless concern. We can wait. Another donor might. I had cut him off, my voice firmer than I felt. Don't be silly, Danny. What's the point of having a sister if she can't give you a piece of herself when you need it? The words sounded noble, righteous. I believed them. I believed I was giving him his future, his dreams, the family he was just starting to build with his new fiancée. The sacrifice felt clean, pure. I signed the papers without a second thought. The black ink a stark, definitive promise against the crisp white page. The night before the surgery, he held my hand in the hospital room and said, I'll never forget this, Ellie. I owe you everything. I'll always be there for you. That promise echoed in my mind last Tuesday, a hollow, mocking sound. I'd sent him a text, my fingers clumsy and stiff. It was the anniversary of our mother's death, a day that had always been ours to share, to remember. Asterisk thinking of Mom today. Hope you're well. Love, Ellie. Asterisk the hours ticked by, marked by the grandfather clock's solemn chimes. 1 hour. 4. 8. Just before I went to bed, my phone finally buzzed. Not a call. Not even a real text. Just a thumbs-up emoji. A single, blue, dismissive icon. It was a digital pat on the head. A gesture of such profound indifference it felt more wounding than silence. The contrast between the boy who swore he owed me everything and the man who couldn't be bothered to type a single word was a chasm that had opened at my feet, and I was finally, terrifyingly, looking down into its depths. The rain had been falling for 3 days, a relentless, miserable drizzle that seeped into the bones of the old house and, it seemed, into mine as well. The throw rug at the top of the stairs, the one with the faded peacock design, had always had a tendency to bunch up. I knew this. It was one of 100 small household imperfections I navigated daily. But on that afternoon, lost in a fog of memory, my foot caught. The world tilted. A sickening, vertiginous lurch. There was a moment of pure, suspended disbelief, a silent, internal oh, before the brutal, jarring impact. My hip exploded in a supernova of pain, a white-hot agony so intense it stole my breath and blurred my vision. The fall itself was a clumsy, undignified tumble down half a flight of stairs, a chaotic percussion of bone against wood. I landed in a heap at the bottom, crumpled and broken, the world a kaleidoscope of fractured light and shadow. The pain was a living thing, a predator with its teeth sunk deep into my flesh. Every ragged breath was a fresh wave of nausea and fire. For a long time, I just lay there, the dust bunnies under the hall table my only companions, listening to the rain drum against the roof. The house, my supposed sanctuary, felt suddenly alien and hostile, its familiar shadows twisting into menacing shapes. My thoughts were sluggish, thick with shock, but one single, desperate imperative slowly clawed its way to the surface. Danny. Getting to the phone was an odyssey. It sat on the hall table, a mere 6 feet away, an impossible distance. I tried to push myself up, but a scream tore from my throat as the shattered bone in my hip grated. The pain was a black wave that threatened to pull me under. I had to stay conscious. Gritting my teeth, I began to crawl, dragging my useless leg behind me. It was a slow, agonizing journey, each inch paid for with a fresh burst of agony. My fingernails scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound unnervously loud in the quiet house. Tears of pain and frustration streamed down my face, mingling with the dust on the floorboards. The world had shrunk to the single, desperate task. Reach the phone. Finally, my fingers brushed against the cool, smooth plastic. With a final, guttural sob of effort, I pulled it down, the cord clattering against the table leg. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely punch in the numbers. Daniel's number. The number I knew better than my own. The phone rang, the sound a thin, electronic burr against my ear. A fragile thread of hope cast out into the abyss. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I closed my eyes, picturing him, picturing his face, praying he would answer. Asterisk pick up, Danny. Please pick up. Asterisk the 4th ring. Then his voice not live but a recording. Hey, you've reached Daniel. I'm swamped right now, so leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can. The cheerful, generic greeting was a slap in the face. My hope curdled into a cold, hard knot of panic. I tried to speak, to leave a message, but all that came out was a strangled, gasping sob, a pathetic, animal sound of pure desperation before the line went dead. I lay on the floor, the receiver still clutched in my hand, the dial tone a mocking, incessant hum. He was swamped. The word echoed in the vast, empty space of my pain. The rain fell harder, the world outside gray and indifferent. I was alone, truly and completely alone. It was the squeak of the garden gate that saved me. Mrs. Gable, holding her umbrella like a shield against the miserable weather, peered through the glass of my front door. Her face, initially arranged in its usual cheerful greeting, collapsed into a mask of horror. I saw her mouth form my name, a frantic shout muffled by the door. The sound of her fumbling with her keys, the spare I'd given her years ago, was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and the world finally, mercifully, went black. The confirmation of my abandonment didn't arrive with a dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It came as a text message, 2 days later, as I lay propped up in a hospital bed that smelled of starch and antiseptic. The message wasn't even from Daniel. It was from his wife, Jessica. Asterisk, so sorry to hear about your fall, Eleanor. Danny feels terrible. He's just slammed with that big merger at work. You know how it is. We'll try to visit when things calm down. Asterisk, I read the words over and over, each one a small, sharp shard of glass pressing into my heart. Slammed. Try to visit. The casual, dismissive tone, the second-hand apology. It wasn't just an excuse. It was an erasure. My agony, my fear, my very existence had been relegated to an inconvenience. A task on a to-do list that could be indefinitely postponed. Mrs. Gable was sitting in the visitor's chair, quietly knitting a small, blue baby booty. She saw the change in my face, the way the color drained from it. She put down her needles and placed her warm, dry hand over mine. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just sat there, a silent, sturdy presence in the wreckage of my illusions. Her quiet solidarity was a stark counterpoint to the hollow words on the screen. She was the one who had found me, who had called the ambulance, who had sat in the waiting room for hours. She was the one who brought me a clean nightgown and my favorite book. And Daniel, the man for whom I had literally given a piece of myself, couldn't be bothered to make a phone call. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it left me breathless. It was a cold, clean cut, severing the last thread of hope to which I had been clinging. The next few weeks were a blur of pain management, physical therapy, and long, empty hours staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, which Mrs. Gable had helped set up with a hospital bed. The physical pain was a constant, throbbing reminder of my vulnerability, but it was the emotional agony that truly hollowed me out. In the dead of night, when the house was silent save for its old man groans, the memories would come, unbidden and cruel. I saw everything with a new, excruciating clarity. I was a resource that had been depleted, a service that was no longer required. The long hours were both a curse and a strange sort of gift. With Mrs. Gable's quiet encouragement, I began to talk. At first, it was just a trickle of frustration, but soon it became a flood of memories, of slights ignored, of sacrifices unacknowledged. I was excavating my own life, brushing the dust off of long-buried truths. I gave him my life, I whispered to her one afternoon, the words tasting like ash. Not just the kidney, all of it. She just nodded, her eyes full of a deep, sorrowful understanding. I know, dear. I know. In the depths of one particularly long and sleepless night, a memory surfaced, so bright and beautiful it was almost painful to behold. Daniel was 10 years old, all knobby knees and a gap-toothed grin. We were at the county fair. Our parents were somewhere else, probably arguing, but Danny and I had found our own pocket of magic. He had spent his entire allowance, a whole $5, trying to win me the big prize at the ring toss game, a giant, stuffed unicorn with a rainbow mane. He was terrible at it, his throws wild and clumsy. On his very last quarter, his very last ring, his face was a mask of fierce concentration. The ring sailed through the air, a perfect, wobbling arc, and landed squarely around the neck of a green glass bottle. His shriek of triumph was pure, unadulterated joy. He grabbed the unicorn, a creature nearly as big as he was, and shoved it into my arms. "For you, Ellie," he'd panted, his chest puffed out with pride. "Because you're the best." I had hugged him, burying my face in the cheap, synthetic fur of the unicorn, overwhelmed by the fierce, protective love I felt for him. We were a team then. It was us against the world. But another memory followed close on its heels, a darker one, a shadow I had refused to see. It was from his first year of college. I had worked double shifts at the library for months, saving every spare dollar to buy him the new laptop he needed for his engineering classes. I'd packaged it carefully and mailed it to his dorm, imagining his surprise and delight. I waited for his call. A week went by, then two. Finally, I called him. "Oh, hey Ellie," he'd said, his voice distracted, music blaring in the background. "Yeah, the laptop got here. It's great, thanks." There was a pause. "Hey, listen, I'm kinda in the middle of something. Can I call you back?" He never did. I told myself he was just busy, adjusting to college life. I told myself it was my fault for expecting a parade. I had made 1,000 such excuses for him over the years, papering over the small cracks of his selfishness, preserving the pristine image of the grateful, loving brother I so desperately needed him to be. But the cracks were no longer small. They were gaping fissures, and the entire foundation of my life was crumbling. Lying in that bed, surrounded by the ghosts of my own choices, the pieces finally clicked into place. The heroic sacrifice, the happy childhood memory, the ignored warning signs, and the final, brutal abandonment. It wasn't a story of love and devotion. It was a long, slow con, and I had been the most willing of marks. A coldness seeped into me, a feeling so foreign it was almost startling. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a profound, chilling clarity. The grief was still there, a great, hollow ache in my chest, but something new was crystallizing around it. Resolve. I had given him my body, my money, my time, my life. I had built his world while letting my own fall into ruin. He had made his choice when he ignored my call, when he outsourced his apology. He had chosen to be swamped. And now, with nothing left to lose, I would finally choose for myself. A new and icy purpose began to form, a quiet, unassailable resolution in the very marrow of my weary bones. The idea, when it came, was not a lightning bolt but a quiet dawn. It arrived in the small hours of the morning, after a night spent staring at the ceiling, replaying my life like a film. The house, the money Dad had left for me, the nest egg I'd never touched, the one I'd mentally earmarked for Daniel's children's college funds. It was all mine. The realization was so simple, yet so revolutionary. For decades, my assets, my future, had been inextricably linked with his. Severing that link felt like the only path forward. The next afternoon, when Mrs. Gable arrived with a bowl of chicken soup, I laid it all out for her. My voice was steady, devoid of the quavering emotion that had characterized our recent conversations. "I'm going to sell the house, Agnes," I said, "and I'm going to give the money away." She listened patiently, her knitting needles still for once, her full attention on me. I told her about the community arts program for underprivileged kids that was struggling to find a permanent home. I had read about it in the local paper. They needed a building, a place to put down roots. My house, with its big, airy rooms and overgrown garden, was perfect. The money from Dad would be the endowment, the thing that ensured its future. It was a legacy, but it would be mine, not Daniel's. When I finished, she didn't question my sanity or urge caution. She simply reached over and squeezed my hand. "It's a wonderful idea, Eleanor," she said, her eyes shining. "A truly wonderful idea. How can I help?" Her unwavering support was the final piece of confirmation I needed. She became my co-conspirator, my logistical expert, making calls and arranging meetings while I was still largely confined to my bed. The execution was surprisingly swift, as if the universe itself approved of this course correction. Mrs. Gable brought a young, earnest woman named Sarah, the director of the arts program, to my house. Sarah's eyes lit up as she walked through the rooms, Not seeing the faded wallpaper and worn carpets, but seeing art studios and music rooms, a place teeming with life and creativity. We didn't need lawyers or complicated contracts. I was donating the house outright. The papers were drawn up by a notary Mrs. Gable knew, a quiet man who handled the transaction with a respectful efficiency. Signing my name on that deed of gift was the easiest thing I had ever done. There was no hesitation, no flicker of doubt. Each loop and stroke of the pen was a severance, a cutting of a cord that had been strangling me for years. A few weeks later, we finalized the endowment, transferring the bulk of my father's legacy not to a grown man who saw me as an inconvenience, but to 100 children I would never meet, whose futures would be a little brighter because of it. As Sarah left that final day, her face etched with a gratitude so profound it was humbling, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't losing a house. I was liberating myself from a prison of my own making. I was finally coming home to myself. He showed up on a crisp autumn afternoon, a month after the last paper was signed. I was sitting on the porch swing Mrs. Gable had helped me install, a cup of tea warming my hands, watching a group of teenagers laughing as they painted a vibrant mural on the side of what used to be my garage. The sound of his expensive car pulling up to the curb was an intrusion, a discordant note in the new symphony of my life. Daniel got out, dressed in a tailored suit that looked completely out of place in the cheerful, paint-splattered chaos of the front yard. He walked up the path, his face a carefully constructed mask of concern. "Ellie, what in God's name is going on here? I came by to check on you, and it looks like a circus." "It's a youth center now, Daniel," I said, my voice calm. I didn't get up. "An arts program for local kids." He stared at me, then at the mural, then back at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. The mask was starting to slip. "A youth center? What are you talking about? Where are you living?" "I have the small apartment over the garage," I said, gesturing with my head. "It's all I need." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "The garage apartment? You sold the house and moved into the garage apartment? Ellie, have you lost your mind? After your fall, you should have called me. We could have gotten you into a proper facility, had the house professionally managed." The we was what struck me. The royal we, assuming his dominion over my life, my property. "I did call you, Daniel," I said, my voice still even, still quiet. I watched his face, and for the first time, I saw him not as my little brother, but as a stranger. A stranger whose calculations were whirring behind his eyes. "You were swamped," I added. The words hung in the air between us. His jaw tightened. "And Dad's money?" he asked, the pretense of concern finally evaporating, revealing the raw, grasping avarice beneath. "Surely you didn't just—" "I used it to create an endowment," I said, "to fund this place. Permanently." The blood drained from his face. The mask of the concerned brother shattered, replaced by the slack-jawed disbelief of a man who has just seen his inheritance vanish into thin air. You gave it away? All of it? The house, the money? That was our family's legacy. That was for my kids." His voice rose, cracking with a rage that was breathtaking in its selfishness. "My kids. Not us. Not me. It was never about me. It was Dad's legacy, Daniel." I corrected him gently. "He left it to me. I decided to invest it in a different kind of future." Across the lawn, I could see Mrs. Gable watching from her own porch, a silent, steady witness. Daniel looked from me to the laughing teenagers, to the vibrant mural taking shape, and a look of utter contempt twisted his features. "You've been taken for a fool, Eleanor. Brainwashed by these grifters." I just looked at him, at his expensive suit and his impotent fury, and I felt nothing but a profound, cleansing pity. "No, Daniel," I said, and my voice was the calmest it had ever been. "I've never seen things more clearly in my life." He stood there for another moment, sputtering, searching for a weapon that could wound me. But he had no power here anymore. He had squandered it all on a single, unanswered phone call. With a final, disgusted shake of his head, he turned, stalked back to his car, and drove away. I never saw him again. A year has passed. The garage apartment is small, but it is filled with light. From my window, I can watch the life that now flourishes in the house that was once so silent. The sounds of tentative violin scales, of children's laughter, of a poetry slam on a Friday night. These are the new rhythms of my days. I spend my afternoons in the main house, not as an owner, but as a volunteer. The kids call me Miss Ellie. I read to the younger ones in the same chintz armchair, but its history has been rewritten. It is no longer a monument to a one-sided love, but a place of new beginnings. Sarah, the director, has become a dear friend, and she, along with Mrs. Gable and I, have formed a small, unlikely family. We eat dinner together most nights, our conversation easy and full of genuine affection. I saw a photo of Daniel online a few months ago. Jessica had posted it. They were on a yacht in the Mediterranean, their smiles wide and brittle. He was holding up a glass of champagne, a simple gift he likely thought he deserved. There was a time when that image would have gutted me, would have filled me with a corrosive bitterness. But looking at it then, I felt only a distant sort of peace. His world was one of glass and steel, of acquisitions and appearances. My world was one of paint-stained hands, of shared stories, of a young girl named Maya who finally mastered a C major chord and looked at me with eyes shining with pride. My life is smaller now by every conventional measure. I have less space, less money, fewer possessions. But it is infinitely larger in purpose. The ache in my hip is a constant reminder of the fall that broke me open, but it no longer feels like a wound. It feels like a hinge, the point on which my entire life turned. My real legacy was never the kidney I gave away or the inheritance I held in trust for a man who didn't deserve it. My true legacy is here, in the sound of a child's laughter echoing through a house that is no longer haunted by silence. I did not give my brother a future. I bought one for myself and for countless others. And in that transaction, I finally understood that the most profound act of generosity is the one you extend to your own soul, liberating it from a debt it was never meant to carry.